I'm just going to rush through a bunch of problems here, so feel free to pause the video if you want to read the actual question. We are only given the homozygous brown mice frequency, and that corresponds to p squared here. So p squared is 0.64. And what we're looking for is the frequency of the recessive allele. So in the other equation, we're looking for q here. So the first thing you want to do is from p squared, we want to go to p. And to do that, all you have to do is take the square root of 0.64, and that's what p equals. So we'll just throw that over there. And now all you have to do is calculate for q. So q equals 1 minus 0.8, and that equals 0.2, which is just 20%. There's your answer. In this question, we're given the number of affected individuals, and we need to find the percentage of carriers. So p squared, that's going to be the number of affected individuals. And how we get that, we just divide 15 by 100 to get 0.15, 15%, right? 15% of the population. And what we need to find are the number of heterozygote carriers. So to do this, we need to find p. So just take the square root, 0.15, that's 0.39. Over here, now that we know p, we can find q by simply 1 minus p, which is 0.61. And to find q squared, we'll square that number, 0.37. Bring it over here. So to find 2pq, we just use this formula here, which is 1 minus p squared, which is 0.15, and minus q squared, which is 0.37. And we get a final answer of 0.48 or 48%. Now actually, another way to do this, a faster way, is you notice that 2pq is actually made up of 2 times p times q. So if we go up here, we can just sub in our numbers right away. So 0.39 for p and 0.61 for q. And you just get the same answer like that. Except remember to multiply by 2. And that's your final answer there. In this question, you noticed 15 is actually the homozygous recessive individuals, but I used p in this situation by accident. So really, it doesn't matter if you use p or q, you're just going to get the same answer, right? It's just what people prefer to use when they're doing these calculations, what they represent them with. Here we have a problem that's just a little bit different, and it tests your knowledge about blood types. So we're given that 49% of the population test positive for antibodies. Now, people who don't have a blood type will produce antibodies against that blood type. So this means this population does not have the rhesus factor. And given that Rh is dominant, that means only the homozygous recessive will produce the antibodies. So that 49% is q squared. And now we're asked to find the percentage of homozygous individuals. So now there are two groups of homozygous individuals. which are p squared and q squared. So of course q squared is 49%. And now we can find q, which is just the square root of 49, equals 0.7. So q equals 0.7, and that would make p 1 minus 0.7, 0.3. Now we can find p squared, which is just 0.3 squared. That equals 0.09. And now we just add p squared and q squared to get your final answer here. There's 0.58, or 58% of the population is homozygous. Here we are given the homozygous recessive frequency of 25%, and we are asked to find the heterozygous frequency in the next generation. So let's just ignore this next generation part and figure out the heterozygous frequency for this generation. So 25% is q squared, 0.25. And now we can find q. Q is just the square root of 0.25, just 0.5. And that makes p 0.5 as well. And now we can calculate 2pq, which is just 0.5 times 0.5 times 2. And that equals 0.5, 50% of the individuals in this generation will be heterozygote. So since this is based on Hardy-Weinburg principles, this means that between generations, from generation to generation, the genotypic frequencies and the allelic frequencies will stay the same. So this means that the next generation will also be just 50%. Here we have a population that is governed by a questionable set of policies, and we can see that we have some individuals here affected by a recessive condition. So this 4,000 here, that's going to be q squared, and we're trying to figure out the carriers, so the carrier is 2pq. Before we move on, we have to convert this 4,000 here into a percentage, or a proportion. Or it's just, the calculation won't work out, right? Everything is done in frequencies or proportions. So here we find it's 0.026, and we can calculate q from this. And q is 0.16. Now we have 0.16, we can minus that from 1 and get p, which is 0.84. And now we can determine 2pq, just plugging those numbers in and multiplying by 2. And we get 27%. Now the question is asking for the number of people that will be the carriers. So we just have to go a step further and actually multiply this by the total population. So 27% multiplied by 150,000 is 40,500. And that's the final answer. If you made it to the end of this video, I applaud you. I hope you learned something, and if you have any questions, just comment down below.